Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now then, in a week where the Mazur case continues to dominate litigators, and more on that later, we take a walk through some of the highlights of last week's bulletin. So, Dennis, what's our first item for discussion?
Well, Helen, first we turn to planning and changes in planning. Rachel Reeves is set to announce a round of planning changes before the budget as a way to kickstart Britain's sluggish economic growth. But ministers are at odds over how radical to be. The Chancellor will announce a number of moves designed to make it easier for developers to build houses and infrastructure projects in the hope that they will fill about £3 billion of her estimated £3 billion black hole.
Yeah, that's right. The package, I understand, is designed to bolster fragile private sector confidence, which fell to a record low last month, according to figures from the Institute of Directors. Now, ministers are planning a separate nature bill later in the Parliament, and that's designed to rewrite some of the environmental rules that the government believes unfairly hold up new projects in parts of the country.
But senior members of the government have said that the latest attempts to encourage new building will amount only to technical adjustments to what they've already announced. They are, however, at odds over whether to push ahead with an entirely new planning bill, which the Prime Minister has said is almost certainly needed, but which some ministers believe would be an unnecessary distraction. And one government source has said the Treasury is desperate to make announcements on planning, but the truth is we are already doing most of the stuff we wanted to do, and trying to reopen all of that is not a good idea.
Well, Alexa, well, I should know how to say that, Culver, who's a planning lawyer at RSK Wilding, said that the government was presiding over, quote, a chaotic slew of destructive new bills with no strategy, vision, due process, consultation, or democratic mandates. Quite scathing. And a government spokesman said that the Chancellor and the Housing Secretary are working together to reform the outdated planning system that's been holding this country back. That's what they say, so that they can build 1.5 million homes. Hard-working people need and have given the green light to projects like the Lower Thames Crossing to drive jobs and growth. Now, Reeves and Keir Starmer have put planning reform at the heart of their growth plans, launching a bill earlier this year to make it easier to build without paying as much for expensive wildlife protection, so say then. And Reeves have also been looking at ways to strengthen the bill again in the Lords.
Yes, they have. Although she has not taken any final decisions, she is understood to be looking at a proposal by the Labour peer Philip Hunt to make it easier to build projects that are likely to have a minimal environmental impact. And she's also exploring a separate amendment by the Conservative peer Charles Banner to make it easier to adapt project plans once they've been approved. Other changes could include further restrictions on who can bring a judicial review against an infrastructure project and how many times they could do so, as well as banning judges from quashing a planning approval if legal cases are still being heard. Reeves will announce her support for changes to the bill in the hope that it will pass through the Lords and receive royal assent before the budget. If she does so, officials believe the Office of Budget Responsibility could judge it to add about £3 billion a year to the economy in the long term.
Well, let's see what happens there. Now let's move to other news. The Competence and Conduct Standard for social housing will come into force in October 2026, with a transition period before all relevant staff must have or be working towards appropriate qualification, and this has been confirmed by the government.
Yes, indeed, and the introduction of the Competence and Conduct Standard stems directly from the evidence heard by the Grenfell inquiry and forms part of the government's wider response to the tragedy. The inquiry heard that a lack of appropriate staff training contributed to the tragedy and that residents' fears and complaints about living conditions were disregarded by staff.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the Social Housing Green Paper consultation highlighted similar concerns relating to the safety and quality of social housing as well. And the professionalisation review, which took place back in 2022, Now, that review, which was researched by the IFF into professionalism amongst housing staff, concluded that measures should be introduced to drive organisational-wide culture change within the social housing sector. And it recommended that any qualification requirements should be focused on senior staff who are best placed, they said, to cascade their knowledge throughout the organisation.
And the previous government did this through provision in the Social Housing Regulation Act 2023. But now let's take a look at the timelines on this, Helen. The standard will come into force in October 2026 with a transition period before all relevant staff must have or be working towards an appropriate qualification. The transition period is 3 years for large registered providers and their service providers, that's to say 1,000 homes or more, and 4 years for small registered providers and their service providers, that's for organisations with under 1,000 homes.
Well, who's caught by this need for a qualification? Well, it's intended to capture persons where they have a substantive role in managing delivery of housing management services, and that those responsibilities would be, quote, an important and substantial aspect of their role, meaning that they are expected to spend the majority, usually more than half, of their working time managing delivery of housing management services to the registered provider's social housing tenants, or that managing delivery of housing management services is an important and substantial aspect of their role. Now, that's a little bit unclear, in my opinion, as to who's caught. It's important to note that what I've just stated is an expansion on that which was originally presented by the government in their consultation. So that position has now changed slightly. But I do think that there might be some question marks over who ought to have that qualification. And if in doubt, it's probably best to err on the side of caution. But there might be more guidance on that as we move forward. Now, have you had enough? Are you drained? Are you feeling unappreciated? There's worrying news for the profession, Dennis, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is. The very stark news, in fact, with 1/3 of workers in the legal services sector wanting to quit the profession in the next 5 years, a major new survey has found. Legal mental health charity Lawcare, we've reported on them in the past, as you'll remember, Helen, they found a similar proportion would not recommend law as a career, with half of all respondents saying they had experienced anxiety often, very often, or all the time in the past year. Key factors behind discontent were high levels of work intensity and feeling unsafe or unsupported in the workplace. More than 3/4 of respondents said they regularly worked over their contracted time, while just over 8% estimated they worked at least 21 hours overtime each week. And nearly 1/5 of law workers had experienced bullying, harassment and discrimination in the past year.
Now, we don't know, of course, or certainly we don't have the figures to demonstrate how much of this is applicable, how many of the respondents were from the private sector, in-house or local authority. But I know anecdotally that many of our members work a lot of hours over their contracted time. And that is quite a stressful environment to be in, albeit incredibly rewarding. And Elizabeth Rimmer, who's the chief executive of Lawcare, said that the profession is at a crossroads in terms of how it protects and enhances the well-being of staff. And she said, quote, "We have it in our hands to transform the way we work and build a future where people are supported to perform at their best and build sustainable careers." And going on, I think it's important to hear what she said. She said, "The path to prioritising mental health and well-being before us is clear. Now is the time for leaders to act with courage, move away from practices that normalise overwork, which risk driving people out of the sector, and take the path to a better future by valuing people management."
Indeed, and this is an interesting point. The survey of around 1,500 people in the first 3 months of this year found a particular problem with preparing lawyers to be managers. Only 55% of those managerial responsibilities had received training to support them in managing people, with just 31% who had their targets or billable hours adjusted to take account of the extra responsibilities that they'd taken on.
I think that's a really key point, isn't it? Because often people become managers predominantly on the basis they've done it before, but that doesn't mean that and I think there is a gap there. And I also know that billable target hours, and that is also applicable to the local government sector. I know not everybody does it, but a lot of authorities bill that there is this juxtaposed position between what your targets are and how much time you're supposed to give to effective management.
Yes.
And of course, being an effective manager promotes the well-being of your entire team, doesn't it? So
yes, that's part of it, of course.
now, Lawcare have called on legal workplaces to prevent burnout by actively managing workloads, rethinking targets and incentives, and challenging the culture of long hours. It also wants firms to prioritise and value managing people and to properly assess whether programmes to support mental health and well-being are indeed working. Now, in the foreword to the Lawcare report, the Lady Chief Justice, Baroness Carr of Walton on the Hill, and we hear from her quite a lot, says the long-term sustainability of the legal sector relies not only on attracting and retaining people, but on fostering a culture where people can grow and contribute fully and choose to stay.
And she added, prioritising mental health is essential if we are to build a sector that is inclusive, resilient and fit for the future. Those in senior positions across legal education, regulation and practice can commit to actions to make meaningful change, and so they should. And going on, she said, the findings in this research challenge us to lead with empathy, to listen and to act with purpose. Our collective future depends on both innovation in how we deliver legal services and how we support the people who deliver them. I agree entirely, Helen.
Absolutely. And with local government reorganisation and shifts in the political landscape, LLG are here for its members. And we will be running a wellbeing week in January, covering a host of supportive topics. So do look out for that. Now, as I said at the beginning, Mazur is causing consternation. LLG are alive to the issue, and we are meeting with the Legal Services Board to put forward the particular local authority sector position and differences, of course, to that of the private or in-house sector. Of particular note, we are, of course, concerned for our CILEX members, with the news internally reported that the CRL have said Quarter of Protection work is not covered by certificates. So we're going to check on that. But we do understand that this is a broader issue, and we do understand that it's affecting our CILEX members greatly.
Indeed, and this next part, the Law Gazette report that you found out, Helen, is a bombshell, really, because the the Law Gazette report says that a leaked webinar revealed that CILEX members had been given, quote, had been rather misled pre-Mazur. In its article on the 6th of October, which is in the bulletin, John Hyde writes that the webinar in question was jointly hosted by CILEX and CILEX regulation to specifically address practice rights. He continued that one of the viewers asked about the long-term implications of a CILEX fellow not obtaining practice rights. CILEX membership manager Louise Terrell replied, "There isn't one. You will continue to work as you were under supervision and remain a chartered legal executive. So there aren't any implications on that from our perspective." And Siobhan O'Mahony, the practitioner authorisation and supervision manager at CRL, added, "You're an authorised person under the Legal Services Act, aren't you? So there's no implication to not getting practice rights."
Oh, I mean, prior to this article, just a few days before, in fact, CILEX had defended its position, stating that CILEX interpretation of the Legal Services Act has always been aligned, and that of other regulators, and with guidance on the conduct of litigation. When practice rights became available to CILEX professionals in 2014, those with litigation practice rights have been authorised, excuse me, to conduct litigation independently and within their authorised specialism. And since then, we have strongly encouraged members to obtain these rights, and this has been communicated repeatedly through the member portal, newsletters, emails, journal articles, webinars, and in-person events. That's quite a list, but there's no getting away from the fact that that webinar existed.
Yeah, it doesn't leave any other channels outstanding,
No, it
I
doesn't.
don't think, does it? But however, we should acknowledge that CILEX have also stated that they are, quote, deeply concerned about the upset this is causing their members and understand the frustration being voiced from within the CILEX community. And I think it is really important to acknowledge, Helen, that the very real and tangible impact this is having on our own CILEX colleagues in terms of casework being removed from them, and the emotional impact, I don't doubt, here too, where some lawyers have reported feeling worthless.
Yeah, it's really terrible. Silex uh, lawyers and practitioners, I was talking to one the other day who felt that they'd worked really, really hard to get to where they had, and now they're being told you can't do that. And I can't imagine how that must feel. LLG are not ignoring this issue
No.
and stand by for some guidance, and we will do what we can if we're required to lobby in this space as well. Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, I turn next to something that I have to say was entirely new to me and almost unbelievable, really. It's this newish concept, I suppose it's that, of polygamous working. The Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit, the CFEU, which is a local government shared service for councils in the south of England, has conducted a review into polygamous working, following the recent conviction of a man who was simultaneously employed across 3 councils.
Yeah, and we should just emphasize this is not a question of being a consultant and taking up a variety of
No.
contracts or working in the evenings on a sort of side, very limited contract. This is literally working
Yeah.
full time for 3 authorities.
Yeah.
Flabbergasting, frankly. So the CFEU conducted a review of the risks posed by undisclosed multiple employment and the challenges of oversight in hybrid working arrangements. And it also issued 16 recommendations covering clearer contractual language, greater checks on current or prospective employees, and new disciplinary measures.
Yes, and the review comes at just a month on from Bryn Howells being found guilty of committing fraud for working for 3 councils and a Tech-Al company and providing services to another council at the same time. Now, he was sentenced on the 28th of August to 3 years imprisonment for 3 charges and a further 2 years imprisonment to run concurrently for 6 other charges. Tewkesbury Borough Council, which was one of the 3 councils affected in the case, detailed some of the review's findings in a full council meeting on Tuesday the 30th of September.
Yeah, well, West Oxfordshire District Council's Audit and Governance Committee also considered a report on the CFEU's review last week. And the District Council's report confirmed that the work plan, that's the CFEU's work plan for 24-25, included a focus on fraud risk mitigation regarding grant schemes and polygamous working as high-risk areas.
Yeah, and Tewkesbury has implemented the review's recommendations, and these include providing clearer contractual language and declarations of interest, explicitly requiring disclosure and approval of any secondary employment, and also strengthening verification processes at recruitment and throughout employment, including cross-checks with external data sources to identify potential conflicts or risks, and also a recommendation concerning updating guidance for members, for managers rather, with a focus on effective oversight in remote and hybrid working environments. And I suppose it's those hybrid environments, the remote environments, that difficulties can arise in enforcing these arrangements.
Yeah, I imagine that's the real rub there. There was also recommendations around revised disciplinary proceedings, enabling more decisive action in cases of fraud, misrepresentation, or breach of trust. And I think people can get quite, fraud can be seen as a bit of a complex area and a little bit alarming to move forward on, but it is fraud. There's no getting away from it. And a new manager toolkit designed to support performance management, visibility, and accountability in hybrid settings. And certainly, I think that's something LLG are going to look at further.
Yeah.
That might.
Yes, all the recommendations make eminent sense, it seems to me. The Counter Fraud and Enforcement Unit also produced an updated fraud risk strategy, compliance report and response plan covering wider fraud risks. But I must say, Helen, I do find this story quite astonishing that anyone got away with this polygamous working business. I just wonder how they got away with it.
Management oversight has to play a part, no, in terms of delivery. But again, if you're busy and you've got issues in terms of the fact that you've got to be putting your outputs out, as well as, I mean, I don't know is the answer, Dennis, but it did happen. So when you're working from home and you've got busy trusting managers, a short period of time, I don't know how long this went on for before it was noticed. But what's really astonishing is the belief that Mr. Howells didn't think he would get caught if he tried this. And he obviously didn't, because he's now in custody. So
Yeah, I think probably it was an offence bound to be caught out.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, finally in the podcast, let's turn our attention to Wales and our Welsh colleagues taken from the bi-weekly Welsh Bulletin. Now, this is the news in Wales that the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales has published its annual equality report for 24-25. The report outlines the work undertaken by the office to support and promote diversity, equality and inclusion across all its functions. Now, the highlights of the year include more impactful work to ensure that the service is accessible to all, in addition to ongoing work to improve the website and information resources. Now, the office accepted just over 160 complaints, other than in writing, a much higher number than last year, because last year stood at 103. And this year, 86% of complainants that took part in the Ombudsman survey said that it was very easy to contact the office. And there were also strong results for awareness of and confidence in the office amongst the Welsh public. And this year, 48% of people asked said that they knew about the Ombudsman, which I actually think is quite a good figure.
Yeah.
And only a slightly lower proportion than last year. So that is a bit of a step back, but it's still pretty good because most people don't know about the Ombudsman's role. Positively, of all equality groups monitored, only people from diverse backgrounds were slightly less than average aware of the office, and it was very slight. So there's obviously been progress made there.
Indeed, Helen, and the report also demonstrated a negative median and mean gender concerning gender pay gaps. And in addition, an ongoing trend is that women among the Ombudsman's workforce consistently outnumber men by a significant margin, which is interesting. And the report saw a big increase in the proportion of staff with Welsh language skills. Between 26 and 28% of the Ombudsman's staff this year were able to speak, read or write in Welsh fairly well or fluently, and that itself is interesting, isn't it? And finally, as to successful outreach events to raise awareness of the office, an estimated 1,000 people visited the Ombudsman's stand at the National Eisteddfod.
I rather like the Eisteddfod. However, one of the key challenges remains that despite increased outreach and communications activity, the Ombudsman has struggled to diversify the profile of people who use its service. And also very few people continue to use the service in Welsh. It'd be interesting to see whether the Welsh Ombudsman and the Ombudsman for England touch base with each other. I'm presuming they do actually, so they can learn lessons across.
Well, there's a lot of commonality, isn't there, in the work that they do?
A huge amount of common. There are differences, especially in regards to standards, but nevertheless. Now, elsewhere in Wales, the Welsh Government has launched a rapid action task force to tackle nutrient pollution. Now, this is something we have touched upon, certainly within English jurisdiction, because that's said to have brought house building in Pembrokeshire and across West Wales to a standstill. Now, announced by Mid and West Wales MS I'm going to pronounce that word, MS Morgan, the task force will bring together government, local authorities and Natural Resource Wales to find practical solutions so housing development can move forward. Now I have to apologise for my pronunciation, and I'm quite sure there's people laughing in Wales. Well, let's move on.
Yeah, well, yes, let's turn to the Senate. The key dates for the 2026 Senate election, indeed, are all now set out in the Senate Cymru Representation of the People Order 2025, known as the Conduct Order, and also the Government of Wales Act 2006. Now, the last day of the Senate is the 27th of March 2026, and the date of poll being the 7th of May 2026.
Well, that seems a remarkably long way away, doesn't it? A remarkable date, but it's not, is it?
So no, not at all. Not when you're planning for it.
Oh, absolutely not. And they'll be planning now. So best of luck to all our colleagues who may or may not be involved. And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 34, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Goodbye now.